Hoje
अभी नहीं डेवलप हुआ है बहुत
They used to carry feces in it. They would collect physically all feces from their home. 원은 MC였죠. दूसरी होंगी ना पूछा था ना Japan no puede hablar.
Iets zijn, dat is goed games.
Hasan'da beğenmiyor korku. Yemişsin. Jack Hasan.
Information to make us what are you
Very much.
Professor Noor Ahmed Baba Sahab, Mr. Zadji Mohammed Sahab, Deans of various faculties here in the audience, heads of various departments, distinguished guests, members of civil society, faculty members, Registrar of the University of Kashmir, Professor Fayaz Sahab, students, scholars, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you all this afternoon on the occasion of World Book and Copyright Day celebrations. Today's event offers a golden opportunity to pay tribute to writers and to honor the book as a protector of memory, a vector for creativity, a fundamental means of access to knowledge, and an invaluable lifelong companion. Books and reading material today are as important as ever. Only through reading does each reader establish a dialogue with the author of a text that differs according to the imagination of each reader. Books are therefore important means of cultural identity that anyone should have access to. The written words and the book have been precious tools for documenting and transmission of learning and knowledge through generations, for recording mankind's history and social modes, our cultural heritage and value systems, for enabling us to chronicle cumulative knowledge in our quest to understand man's and the universe around him. Each recorded piece of information has allowed the succeeding generations to add to it, perhaps reshape it, and thus mankind has progressed to the present level of technologically advanced civilization. Contrary to the popular beliefs that rise of internet does not necessarily mean that reading will become irrelevant, one should firmly believe that reading habit starts from mother's womb, is nurtured at home, in schools, and in the libraries. That is why greater emphasis ought to be laid on more humane and child-centered educational curriculum, where students will be given projects and will be guided and encouraged to explore information sources on their own. Today, we are celebrating the multifaceted uses of book. In fact, the book is one of the most faithful companion of human being. It is not rare to see in school premises, in public places, in buses, boys and girls who are reading books not necessarily for academic purposes, but also as hobby. This event is also aimed at sensitizing government bodies as well as public at large to see a book as a means of knowledge, expression, and communication, which despite the emergence of increasingly sophisticated electronic media, remains the basis for active education and critical thinking. It also emphasizes the role of books and copyright in development of culture of peace, tolerance, and universal dialogue. This day also reminds us to respect copyright, which encourages the creation and dissemination of knowledge. Copyright grants legal protection to creators who may be rewarded for their work, and by providing reasonable access to society to encourage innovation, search, research, and further creativity. It balances the need of users and protects the interests of the creator of a work. Which has started with the inauguration of exhibition of rare books and photographs on Jammu and Kashmir in the Museum of Central Asian Studies, include the prize distribution to most frequent user of the library and book review session. America's role is a major activity of today's event. The review shall be made by inaugurating the book exhibition upstairs. I am thankful to Professor Noor Ahmed Baba. With these few words, I once again welcome you all to this session with the hope that our young generation will
Thank you, Professor Riyaz Bhai Sahab, for welcoming the guests and participants and highlighting the importance of to encourage and patronize the students and scholars for making best use of the resources dedicated to field students and scholars, having extensively used resources of the library. As per statistical records available with us, a student and a scholar. Mr. Sajjad Ahmed Darzi is the first to come over today. Ms. Taira.
It's a gift for you.
To receive the felicitations at the honest hands of the Vice Chancellor. Donated gifted books, manuscripts to this library for the record and benefit of the posterity. In this connection, one philanthropist, KS, who is here with us to donate some rare books and manuscripts to the library. He is requested to present its gift and have blessings of the book lovers. Ms. Tara is requested.
These are my books.
He has donated these books to the library, which are rare manuscripts. So we're indeed grateful.
Very rare books, as old as 150 years old. Some of them.
Thank you, Mr. Gilan, for presenting the book. Henry London Spotlight Free Education Mail is coming with a generous hand. Donating. Very important activity of the event is in Kashmir. The reviewer is Honorable Vice Chancellor Professor Dr. Riyaz Mujahid Sahab, present the book review and preside the session.
And book lovers from civil society, students, scholars, ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed a great pleasure for me that all of you have assembled here, showing your keen interest in book discussion and I'm sure that in real society, when you read books, you definitely imbibe new ideas and they take you on a journey where not only you are informed, but you develop the faculties of analysis and you can look at the world in a more equipped way than those who remain ignorant. I again express my gratitude to my friend Mr. Gilani for his donation of rare books worth lakhs of rupees. Instead of leaving them at his home, as many people leave it to the worms and insects, he has preferred to donate them to us so that our scholars get benefited by these books. And as he said that one of the books written by his grandfather, who was in Yarkand, must be a memorable treasure, also indicating that the sway Kashmir is held in the past also to the republics and the countries beyond the boundaries of Kashmir. I'm thankful to Mr. Gurku for giving us the files of his paper. But nonetheless, I'm overwhelmed with the whole atmosphere and environment of showing interest in library and the books. And this young man who has read about 188 books in 1 year and whom we just now decorated, and the other man also. So these are very healthy indications and trends in our society. And I wish that you, in your own individual way, start from your own families and from your home, encouraging youngsters to read books. Otherwise, I know pretenders who pretend by reading the first page and then the middle page and the last page that they are the great scholars. And again, a large number of educated people who don't even read a newspaper. And I pity such characters. Anyway, my presence here today is not to review this book called The Limits of Influence, because vice chancellors are so preoccupied under files and the administration. But I consented to express my solidarity with the book lovers and with Mr. Riaz Rufai, who has been organizing these events. I will speak very briefly on the book with great trepidation, because the book is about America's role in Kashmir, the limits of influence. But however, I have the confidence to say that we who live in Kashmir, who were born and brought up in Kashmir, all of us by and large are like that character in Mahabharata which is called Gandhari. Now Gandhari is the lady who was blindfolded and she is asked to narrate the events taking place in Mahabharata. Even blindfolded, she keeps on telling what's happening in the war of Mahabharata. So in that sense, even if you make us blindfolded, we can tell you that what this book contains, because we have gone through this. We have witnessed the developments, all of us, not necessarily agreeing or disagreeing with the events, but we have been what Frank Morris would call witness to an era. So all of us have been witness to an era. This book is by and large a documentation of events which start from the day when Kashmir issue was taken to the United Nations. But for my young friends here, this book provides you an opportunity to look at the web of rising from time to time, not palatable to those who have some politics or ideology to pursue. In 1947, the process of decolonization started. In 1947, the United Nations recognized the right of self-determination. In 1947, Sixth Committee of UN was formed. And the cases of all those areas where self-determination had to take place were assigned to the Sixth Committee. Kashmir didn't find place in the Sixth Committee. Kashmir was not referred to the Sixth Committee, although the issue of self-determination kept on ringing within the walls of the United Nations. I don't find an answer to this. One issue is that. Second, did Kashmir become a pawn in the big game of world powers, in which India had to be pressurized to belong to one particular bloc or the other? Pakistan was to be dragged into one or the other bloc, and there was no way out to resolve the Kashmir issue. The author of this book, Howard Scheffer, claims to have been working in Delhi as an official of the United States Embassy. That means he has not been a diplomat of high order, and he has not been privy to many decision-making processes. But you don't know. Must have been some important official back in his country who found place in the US Embassy in Delhi. But the facts which he has brought forth have already been documented. And those who are interested to know what happened, how Kashmir got twisted in the United Nations, should read Cesar Gupta's book, very important book on Kashmir. Leafing through the book, Scheffer refers to the point man for American efforts was Warren R. Austin, a former Republican senator from Vermont, whom President Truman had named U.S. Permanent Representative to the United Nations in 1946. And he tells us about this character, Austin, and gives us the impression that Britishers did try to approach Austin. They did try to influence him, that what was their perception about Kashmir. And then claims that Austin did not buy this. But Mr. Schaeffer forgets that the role of Austin in the United Nations should be, it was fantastic and devastating. In the sense, now, again, referring to Cesar Gupta, Austin tells Indian representative to the United Nations, when he said that many formulas were discussed, many issues were raised, there was heated debate and discussion, the representative says, let me go to my back home, Delhi, to consult my leaders. Austin tells him, I will not let you go to the washroom. Yeah, you have to stay here, even if you go without your food. Even if it takes you 24, 48, 60 hours, take a decision here. Schaeffer tells us as if Austin was an innocuous man and Britishers were trying to influence him and Americans were clueless because they wanted to keep the issue alive. They wanted to course India to fall in the bloc because by that time it was America-Russia rivalry going on. And Schaeffer also says, yes, after 62 Indo-Chinese war, America did pressurize India, rather arm-twisted, to fall in the line. But now things had taken a very interesting turn. American pressure to India and Pakistan would result in their proximity of one power to going to Moscow and another power going to Beijing. If you twisted the arm of India, they would go to Russians. If you twisted the arm of Pakistan, they would go to China. So this is the rigmarole in which Kashmir fell. The point which emerges is that nobody was interested in resolution of Kashmir. Last of them, the big powers. Except that they wanted to settle their scores. After 65 Indo-Pakistan war, it was not the America, it was the Soviet Union which came forward and resulted in Tashkent Declaration. Now, yes, I am getting old. It's very interesting that it's in some book from Pakistan which came. When Tashkent Declaration was signed, Zulfikar Bhutto is reported to have told Gromyko, Andrei Gromyko, who was the foreign minister of Russia, saying that this declaration doesn't mention about Kashmir. What kind of this Tashkent Declaration is this? Andrei Gromyko is reported to have said, Mr. Bhutto, what you could not get in battlefield, how do you expect to get it in a room sitting and signing a declaration? And then it seems that after 65 and Tashkent Declaration, according to Schaeffer, the American interest declined in Kashmir until 71 took place, the emergence of Bangladesh and breakup of Pakistan. Now I want to, which Schaeffer has not written, but now it's very interesting. Mao Zedong's exchanges with this American diplomat who's very famous, Henry Kissinger. And before, when they're about to go to a war in 71, we all remember, we all were young in 71, but we were watching the events. Kashmiris start listening to radio at 5 o'clock in the morning and switch off at 12 o'clock in the night. So this 7th Fleet was to arrive from America. You recall? And we are looking to 7th Fleet, it never arrived. 7th Fleet has to arrive, and Bangladesh is to be saved. India is to be driven out. This bloody 7th Fleet is not arriving. Now, there is a twisted tale is that Kissinger comes. He goes to Pakistan. He comes to India, but ultimately lands in Beijing. And it was not Mao Zedong, it was Chou Enlai. Chou Enlai. I'm telling you, I'm getting old. Now, Kissinger starts discussing. And Chou Enlai is telling him that India has the mentality of expansionism, and he refers to Discovery of India, in which Nehru had said, our civilization is old. And Chou Enlai is trying to tell him that this Nehru perhaps had the eyes on China. Now, encouraged by this narrative, Kissinger passes on the real thing, that, well, if you intervene at this stage, obviously, via Ladakh, we will keep quiet. US wanted to stay put their brigades, 7th Fleet, but is coaxing China that if you launch an attack from China, from this Ladakh border or some other border, US will keep quiet. Now, Chou Enlai doesn't buy this. He says, no, why should we intervene? And then Pakistan is broken into two, and Bangladesh is emerged, and 7th Fleet never arrives. Well, Schaeffer then says that US interest and there's a limited attention to the situation in Kashmir. And however, then 90, we all witnessed what happened. And even in Kargil war, as Bill Clinton intervened, escalations were controlled. Schaeffer says that now he concludes what his conclusion is. Very interestingly, he concludes by saying that India has come closer to America, being an emerging economic power. And they have become now nuclear partners also. However, Schaeffer advises India to show flexibility and says that if India wants a seat in the Security Council, it has to address the issue of Kashmir. And then wisely says that what can America do? Now he raises the technicality. He's talking of negotiators, arbitrators, and facilitators. And he uses a technical distinction. Who is an arbitrator? What his role is? Who is a negotiator? What a negotiator can do? And who is a facilitator? So he cleverly says that America cannot be a negotiator, America cannot be arbitrator, because India is not ready to accept that. But at the best, US can play the role of a facilitator. And US can facilitate the resolution of Kashmir. And he has underlined some settlement formula, line of control or something geographically close to it will become the permanent border between India and Pakistan. The border will be sufficiently porous to allow for the easy movement of people and goods across it. Kashmiris on both the sides will be granted a greater degree of self-government and much greater for Indian Kashmir than among residents of Azad Kashmir and the northern areas. Joint institutions will be established on all Kashmir bases that will manage to play a role on non-controversial matters. This is his conclusion. And he also says that not that American state or American government is involved or interested, but he says that there are groups in US. He refers to some expected Kashmiris also who have been harping on settlement of Kashmir. But Schaeffer rules out the greater role of US in Kashmir. And according to him, there is a limit to America's influence in settling the issue. He also refers to Obama's statement, because the way Barack Obama made statements, it appeared he was going to appoint a pointsman for Kashmir. But I think what Schaeffer says, he was advised against it on the ground that India would take it as an unfriendly act. Therefore, Obama desisted from that. He did not have a pointsman on Kashmir. But fact of matter, he raises that the problem of Kashmir, which he frequently refers, is that the resolution has to be acceptable in India, in Pakistan, and in Kashmir. And it's where he says that perhaps US could play the role of the facilitator. The point he misses is that if US could use its influence in India or in Pakistan, how the US is going to use its influence in Kashmir? He doesn't define that. He leaves it at that. And secondly, he misses the point that Pakistan Army has a greater role in domestic as well as foreign policy of Pakistan. How is that component of that society to be integrated in a resolution? He has no answer for that. As I said, that there are still big powers, although they say that the Cold War has ended. But those who observe world events, they can see that a new Cold War is emerging. One state of blocks disappeared, new blocks are emerging. And perhaps that's how world moves on in its new phase, in its new incarnation. And we have to watch that. Thank you very much.
We have had an enlightening perspective on the book, The Limits of Influence, by Howard B. Schaeffer. No review can ever be a comprehensive, complete. So there is always scope for some variation in perspectives. Riaz Saab, Professor Riaz Punjabi Saab, our Honorable Vice Chancellor, has focused on some important flaws in the book or some many aspects, very important things. I, being a student of political science, I would slightly have a slightly different perspective. Sir, I agree with you that what is written in the book is broadly known to us. I don't think there is anything, well, the pattern is known, but details possibly are a useful input to us. How it all happened, how it all transpired, because many a times we view that our commonsensical understanding of global situation is that America is a superpower, Soviet Union was a superpower. How is it that they are intervening and that's not, no impact is, there is no impact on the situation? As students of political science, I would also say we do have some inkling of what power politics as it operates globally. We have some understanding of patterns. But then I would say, I would still give the credit to the book. He has done a useful work of compiling the a kind of chronology with certain analysis of how USA got involved at different levels in situation on Kashmir, right from 1947. Even I would say he starts before Kashmir was taken to United Nations. In a way, whether it should be taken to British, because they thought it was a British concern, because British were here, they were more informed about the situation here. So, but then somehow, gradually US gets involved because Britain had lost the capacity to play a major role because of its weaknesses after Second World War. So United States takes over. So this, in a way, it is a useful thing. I would say, I always tell my students to, if they are students of Kashmir politics or Indo-Pak relations, I always tell them to start from Sisir Gupta, Kashmir and Indo-Pak relations. This is a wonderful, good textbook on. But then again, it's written in '66. Many more developments have taken place and new evidences have cropped up. So that way I would say a book is still a useful thing. I would only try to put it in a context. Why is it that America, such a great power, has not been able to influence the situation the way we expect it to? And the way we would still be expecting. That's why I think that we need to be more realistic on this. We need to understand the global order that we are living in. We are living what we call in political science as state-centric order, where states are sovereign. There's no authority beyond that. All authorities are created by states, whether it is United Nations, it is subservient to state sovereignty, state authority, with all weaknesses of state authority, but this part is still valid and would continue to be valid for some time. And even the weakest of states have certain legitimacy in international order. Therefore, no big power, even in the United States, which was superpower and superpower, ever one power only, can influence the situation completely to its will. And it has been demonstrated. Even whenever they had some wrong notions of it, they have been beaten up. Whether it is in Vietnam, whether it is in Afghanistan, in Iraq. Now compare this situation with a huge state, which are subcontinental states like India and Pakistan. Influencing them, coercing them, forcing them into situations is not going to be easy, could not have been easy. And this is how this book is demonstrating. How helpless United States or it is people that got involved in Kashmir from time to time were helpless. They tried to persuade, they tried to coerce, they tried everything. But they used economic diplomacy also. They came in vulnerable situations like in early 60s when India had been defeated by China. Thought that there was occasions when they would be able to influence situations. But somehow we said that ultimately it comes out, and this man has brought it out, I think, quite clearly, that the United States has always found it helpless, has ultimately withdrawn in helplessness. That's why for about 15 years, from 65 onwards, up to say 70, even earlier, I think around the early 60s, after Soren Singh Bhutto, when they were there was some bit of coercion there also, making them to go for several rounds of discussions and debates. And this is one. See, I think we get some kind of inside view. Even sometimes, as Vice Chancellor Saab has mentioned, that even they were not what we understood, that they were talking of Kashmir autonomy or independence or whatever. Sometimes they were wanting them to agree on very small things. Even they did not agree on those small things. So we have to have that understanding that the kind of, particularly what made it difficult, and it has been illustrated here, is Cold War complexity that we had, the world had gone through in 50s, in 60s, in late 40s, 50s and 60s and 70s. The United States found it many a times difficult to handle countries like Pakistan, because it didn't want to push them too much, that they wouldn't, as Honorable Vice Chancellor has said, they had to be bothered about if they push it Pakistan too much, it would go to Peking, it would go to Chinese, it would more. If India was pushed more, and it had happened in history, it would be pushed to. So this is the complexity of politics as it operates globally. We have, at layman is common, we do understand politics, how things happen, but many a times we don't.
But the book tells us that how Kashmir issue has been a factor in the global politics. It provides you many important insights how during the Cold War this issue became the central issue in the relations, especially with regard to the South Asian politics. As regards Professor Saab's certain points, I would come to them also. A couple of things that my revered friends missed is that the United States, right in the beginning, was looking for independent Kashmir. They had toyed with this idea. That's why Mr. Austin mentioned by Professor Saab. He looks for a person who could be their man in Kashmir, who could carry forward their idea. And they found Sheikh Mohammed Abdullah as an ideal person. And when Sheikh Saab went to the United Nations, along with the Indian delegation, this is what Schaeffer writes. He talked to Austin and told him, when Austin, he referred this third option, idea, to Austin. And Austin he readily told him that we will be supporting you. That's what Schaeffer says. But what happened later? That Sheikh Abdullah deathered. He tried to wriggle out. After some time, he withdrew from it. First he consented, then something happened perhaps to him. He said, no, can you give us something, work out something bigger within the Indian, more autonomy, more where we may be with them, but we must be totally independent. He had a very vague idea about what he wanted. So that is what our reviewers did not mention in their review. Then for corroborating this thing, that how Sheikh Saab talked about it, then he talks about Adel Stevenson, he talks about Henderson, he talks about all these people who were somehow or the other involved in this whole exercise at different junctures of our history. And I had an opportunity of working on this subject. And I was working on how 1953 happened, whether Sheikh Saab had really conspired with Adel Stevenson or not. In my part of that kind of research, I should say, I had an opportunity of meeting certain people. One of them was Morarji Desai. I interviewed Morarji Desai in 1984. And Morarji Desai told me, when I told him, why it happened to Sheikh Abdullah, why did you remove him? He had brought Kashmir to India. He said that Jawaharlal showed me certain papers. Jawaharlal showed me certain documents which justified that Sheikh Abdullah had been hobnobbing with the United States. And when we go through this book, we get the inferences that the idea was toyed by the United States, it was implanted by them, and they wanted to carry forward it. And even if we come to the 90s, when Robin Raffel shot into the news, there also, if you see the statements of 1983, India very harshly reacted to Robin Riffel's statements. And even they said that the Hazratbal siege was a conspiracy by the United States. I would request Gul Mohammad Wani to see those records, the newspapers of 1993. You have many statements by Indian Foreign Minister about role of the United States. So our reviewers did not mention this. Then we come to another point that Professor Saab mentioned too, was that the United States had agreed to the legal validity of the accession. Or another point that Professor Saab raised was that why didn't the right to self-determination become part of the 6th Committee of the United Nations? If we see, historically, if we look at the whole issue, when did they actually Kashmir dispute, when was Kashmir dispute actually born? Till October 27, 1947, India and Pakistan were still talking for amicable settlement of this. That is how, even at that time, the Pakistan, Mr. Jinnah and Jawaharlal Nehru were talking about the resolution of the problem. It was after the 1st of January 1948 when India took the matter to the United Nations that the dispute was born. How could it happen? How could it be part of the 6th Committee in 1947? And it was India that took the issue to the United Nations. Under certain, I don't remember the exact provision under which it was taken. 35B, I think. It was, India at that time had gone with a complaint. Pakistan had not gone. India had gone with a complaint that Pakistan was an aggressor. So the complaint was against an aggressor. It is the United Nations wisdom that brought the resolutions guaranteeing right to self-determination to the people of Jammu and Kashmir state. Now, if we agree with the Professor Saab that United States had accepted the legality in 1947, then United Nations would not have been the co-sponsor of the resolution. United States was the co-sponsor of the resolution that brought that United States would not have insisted on the appointment of Mr. Nimitz as the plebiscite administrator. So there, when we come, so far as the book is concerned, these were the certain points, because I am not to review the book, I have just to make certain observations. As regards Kashmir becoming pawn in the hands of the global politics, I agree to a certain extent. But it became a key factor for South Asian politics, for the United States, for Russia, for the two blocs at that time. And if we see at that juncture, Pandit Nehru does say to Henderson very harshly that I'm not going to leave even an inch of Kashmir. Don't show us your teeth. But at the same time, they were ready. If we go through the book, the United States' presence is from day one till current day in the Kashmir issue. And India and Pakistan virtually have accepted United States as mediator throughout. We say that he is a facilitator. But if you look at the Kargil War, you take any, if you took 90, Professor Saab mentioned about Russia's coming in 1966 in the Tashkent Declaration. But if you see the country behind, again, Schaeffer says that it was the United States that persuaded the Russia to mediate in the affair. So we see the presence of United States as a mediator. That's how I have understood the book. So even at present, and I will not be surprised if India and Pakistan both accept as a negotiator. Thank you with these words very much.
I think I must congratulate the Vice Chancellor for reviewing the book and also the commentators on the book. But primarily I agree with Mr. Vice Chancellor's position because he has better understanding of the diplomacy than my other friends. In the sense, I think we are living in, we are actually suffering from wish fulfillment or wishful thinking when we say that America is very sincere and it has its own problems, it cannot influence. Vice Chancellor is very right in saying that they tried to keep the pot boiling in order to have an influence on South Asia rather than resolve the issue. If you go by the statements which have been made so far by different US governments from time to time, they have never talked about the resolution of the issue. They have always talked about lessen the tension, crisis management. Remember, the very language itself carries a certain understanding that they are not really interested in the resolution. Had they really been interested in the resolution, they would have done the same thing what they have done in the other parts of the world, where they have got so many resolutions passed and they have enforced them, whether it is Iraq, whether it is Afghanistan, whether it is any other part of the world. And therefore, Baba Saab's wishful thinking that America is actually, can't do much because they want to play the role, but they can't do because of this and that. That's not very true. It is real. It is a star to be worked out in the world. And that is why I think his understanding of American role in South Asia is, much more acceptance of the stark reality does not take much away from a
Yes, sir. Something great regarding to all the panelists. I have a question. Does America have any option from an unresolved Kashmir issue as it is today, or it will be benefited more from a resolved Kashmir issue? That's a simple question and brief.
Upon economic development, as well as upon the growth of civil societies in this part of the world. And if you have a conflict which has an impact upon the civil societies, you cannot resolve the conflict. Benazir Bhutto was very much clear on one point, that government and states in India and Pakistan cannot resolve this problem. The problem, if at all it is to be resolved, will be resolved by the people of subcontinent. What is not being sufficiently explored on Kashmir in UNO is that it was not just for some love that Nehru took it to UNO or the great powers got involved in that. There was a certain pattern of politics, and that pattern of politics was that the Anglo-Saxon bloc wanted to favor the Muslim opinion on West Asia, which had been annoyed by the creation of Palestine. And in fact, in order to do that, they wanted to show some sympathy to the Muslims on the Kashmir cause, and hence, in order to match the offense in West Asia, they came to the defense of the public opinion of the Muslims in South Asia by supporting the Kashmir cause in the UNO. Involved all this is some power game, while as the best times for the resolution of the Kashmir issue were those when India-Pakistan relations were cordial. Now, how America is going to play any role in Kashmir, that is something very different.